how one might reduce or even eliminate the stress response quickly in real time should it arise when we don't want it. So we're taking the podium or we're sitting down at a Zoom call and all of a sudden we're feeling flushed. We're feeling like our heart is racing. We're feeling a little too alert. We're feeling a little worked up and we want to calm down. As far as I am aware of, the best tools to reduce stress quickly are going to be tools that have a direct line to the so-called autonomic nervous system. Here's what doesn't work to control stress: telling yourself to calm down. In fact, that tends to just exacerbate stress. Telling someone else to calm down also tends to exacerbate their stress. The neurons that control stress run from about your neck to your navel. So I'm going to teach you the first tool now. And the tool that, at least to my knowledge, is the fastest and most thoroughly grounded in physiology and neuroscience for calming down in a self-directed way is what's called the physiological sigh, S-I-G-H. Now, some of you might have heard me talk about this on previous podcasts, but I'm going to explain this in the context of how respiration in general is used to calm us down. And it turns out you're all doing this all the time, but you are doing it involuntarily. And when you stress, you tend to forget that you can also activate these systems voluntarily. This is an extremely powerful set of techniques that we know from scientific studies that are being done in my lab, Jack Feldman's lab at UCLA, and others now, that are very, very useful for reducing your stress response in real time. And here's how they work. Let's take the hallmark of the stress response. The heart starts beating faster. Blood is shuttled to the big muscles of the body to move you away from whatever it is the stressor is, or just make you feel like you need to move or talk. Your face goes flushed, etc. There is, however, a way in which you can breathe that directly controls your heart rate through the interactions between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Here's how it works. When you inhale, so whether or not it's through the nose or through the mouth, this skeletal muscle that's inside your body, called the diaphragm, it moves down. And that's because the lungs expand, the diaphragm moves down. Your heart actually gets a little bit bigger in that expanded space. There's more space for the heart. So I'm not talking about your emotional heart getting bigger. The consequence, whatever blood is in there is now at a lower volume or moving a little bit more slowly in that larger volume than it was before you inhaled. Okay, so more space, heart gets bigger, blood moves more slowly. The brain then sends a signal back to the heart to speed the heart up. So what this means is if you want your heart to beat faster, inhale longer, inhale more vigorously than your exhales. Now, there are a variety of ways that one could do that, but it doesn't matter if it's through the nose or through the mouth. If your inhales are longer than your exhales, you're speeding up your heart. If your inhales are more vigorous, so even if your inhales are shorter than your exhales, you are speeding up your heart rate. Now, the opposite is also true. If you want to slow your heart rate down, so stress response hits, you want to slow your heart rate down. What you want to do is, again, capitalize on this relationship between the body, meaning the diaphragm, and the heart and the brain. So if you want to calm down quickly, you need to make your exhales longer and or more vigorous than your inhales. Now, the reason this is so attractive as a tool for controlling stress is that it works in real time. This doesn't involve a practice that you have to go and sit there and do anything separate from life. And we are going to get to emotion. Emotions and stress happen in real time. So if you're feeling stressed, you still need to inhale, of course, but you need to lengthen your exhales. Now, there's a tool that capitalizes on this in a kind of unique way, a kind of a twist, which is the physiological sigh. And the physiological sigh is something that we do spontaneously, but when you're feeling stressed, you can do a double inhale, long exhale. The double inhale, exhale, which is the physiological sigh, takes advantage of the fact that when we do a double inhale, even if the second inhale is sneaking in just a tiny bit more air, but when you do the double inhale, exhale, the double inhale reinflates those little sacs of the lungs, and then when you do the long exhale, that long exhale is now much more effective at ridding your body and bloodstream of carbon dioxide, which relaxes you very quickly. Okay, so let's talk about long-term stress. Breathing, controlling heart rate through the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is the basis of what's called HRV, heart rate variability. We know that chronic stress, elevated stress, and especially in the so-called type A personalities, creates heart disease, leading killer in most every country, but in particular in the US. Because of the way that adrenaline impacts those blood vessels of constricting and some and dilating others, it's just that kind of hypertension, chronic hypertension is just bad. And so chronic stress truly is bad. I want to really make that clear because I emphasized a lot of some of the positive effects of stress, but you want to be able to tamp down your stress in real time. You also want to be able to modulate your stress and your emotional relationship to stress in the body in the medium term. But by no means do you want to be stressed out all the time, chronically, for months and months and months and years on end. The best tools, the best mechanisms that we know to modulate long-term stress might surprise you a little bit. First of all, there are going to be the things that don't surprise you, which is everyone knows getting regular exercise, getting good sleep, using real-time tools to try and tamp down the stress response, etc. That's all going to be really useful. The data really point to the fact that social connection and certain types of social connection in particular are what are going to mitigate or reduce long-term stress. And this is a particularly important issue nowadays where we have all these proxies or surrogates for social connection. We're online and texting with people a lot so we can feel connected. Humans are incredibly social creatures. Now, there is a way to look at this whole business of social connection, not from just the kind of wishy-washy, new agey perspective. And I want to point out that sometimes I'll say wishy-washy, new agey. I have nothing against that. My goal here is always to put scientific data and some neurochemistry on things so that for those of you that are into wishy-washy, new agey stuff, you also can arm yourself with some arguments for those of you, the members of your family and your life that maybe aren't so tuned into the typical language around those practices, like, oh, connection is really key. We all get oxytocin. Actually, did you know that connection between individuals rarely causes the release of oxytocin? Oxytocin is released in very particular circumstances, like post-orgasm, baby and mother, milk letdown. It's associated with kind of really intense kinds of pair bonding things of mother and child, also father and child, but especially mother and child because it's relationship to the lactation system. And oxytocin is not just released when we, walk in and, pat the dog on the head, or we see somebody and we give them a hug and, hey, great to see you, fist bump. That's not a situation for oxytocin. When we see somebody that we recognize and trust, serotonin is released in the brain. And that has certain positive effects on the immune system and on other systems of neural repair and synapses and things that really reinforce connections in the brain and prevent that long-term withering of connections. So serotonin is tied to social connection. One of the things that really can mitigate against the long-term negative effects of chronic long-term stress isn't just having fun. We hear all this stuff. You need to play and have fun. That can be a little bit of a tough concept, especially for the hard-driving people or people that are stressed. But having a sense of delight, a sense of really enjoying something that you see and engage in, witness, or participate in, that is associated with the serotonin system. I'll be the first to admit, social connection and friendship and relationships of all kinds to animals or humans or inanimate objects takes work. But it is incredibly powerful. Primates, and we are primates, we are social species. Never before in any primate history, but in particular in human history, have we interacted with so many strangers at a distance when we are not really connected to them. So finding just a few people, even one, or an animal, or something that you delight in, believe it or not, has very positive effects on mitigating this long-term stress, on improving various aspects of our life as it relates to stress and emotionality.